Welcome to Raw, Real, and Right Now. My name is Candace Newton-Chaput. I am the host and creator of Unlocking Secrets for Women. And this is my partner, Katarina.
I'm Katarina Berriger. I'm the owner of Imagine Life Coaching and the current president of the Holistic Chamber of Commerce in Vancouver, Richmond. And I work on relationships and worthiness with women around the world.
So, Kat, we were just talking about how important it was one day to just get our messages out to women, and we came up with this name called Raw, Real, and Right Now. And from my perspective, being raw is opening ourselves up emotionally in a really honest way.
It is.
And you've got some great insights into emotional availability that we were chatting about, and I think that probably most people, women and men, can probably relate to that. So can you just address that a little bit?
Yeah, I have found in my practice and also in my own personal life that if I'm not emotionally available, then I can't attract somebody who is emotionally available. And so if I become emotionally available, I'm more likely to have that vibrational frequency that's going to kind of shine out there into the universe and attract to me somebody who is also on the same frequency.
So what is emotional availability? Like, how would you explain that to someone? You're talking with them and you're saying, let me work with you on what it means to be emotionally available. Are you able to give a really good example of what that would be?
I think what happens is when we're not emotionally available, we're always thinking, why can't I have a relationship? Why isn't somebody coming to me? And the fact is that we're not setting really healthy boundaries in our life. And so we're attracting things and people that are going to disrespect us and make us feel awful about ourselves. And so that kind of perpetuates the whole, I can't find anybody for myself. But in fact, what it is that you are emotionally unavailable. So you're setting it up that way, so that people don't actually come to you, the kind of people that you need. So instead, you're finding abusers and users and that sort of thing.
So what would be the self-talk? How would you reverse that process? So I'm your client, and I've identified with you, I'm emotionally unavailable. So you're going to say to me, okay, Candace, you need to reframe something or rethink something. And let's say my belief is, nobody loves me, and so, I can't find anyone who will love me. What is the actual literal next step in that process? Like step by step, how to walk my way out of that?
Okay, so the way to walk your way out of that is to start by loving yourself. If you don't love yourself, if you don't have that respect for yourself, it's never going to happen. I mean, it might happen for the short term, but not on the long term. So then my process is to help that person to be able to fall in love with themselves, date themselves, create an experience for themselves that makes them understand how special they are, and really start enjoying that process. And that's the beginning of it. I mean, there's so much more.
There's a lot of work. It's interesting because I had, lots of conversations. Women come to me for some one-to-one support. I'm not a life coach at all like you are, but I love to just share as an educator. I share from an educational point of view and rethinking that. Why don't we rethink that thought? And so it's about education. And I've heard several women in the last short period look at me and say, I just want so badly for someone to just love me for who I am. And I'm just like absolutely in a state of shock when I hear that. And I look right at them and I'm like, did you hear just what you just said? And they're like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
And I said, can I hold up a mirror, please?
Exactly.
You are waiting for someone else to love you, and you've put this tremendous burden on somebody else who could never get inside you and know exactly what you need and how to do that. You're your own best friend. You're the very first person who could actually do that. And then I say this little humorous thing, which I learned way back when I was teaching adult women in the adult education program. The girls were like, Candace, give us an example of what it means. And I said, okay, here you go. This is personal responsibility for yourself. Everybody has a bladder. And everybody knows when they have to go to the bathroom. And so I said, all right, ladies, who knows when you have to pee? And it's funny because the girls were saying things like, oh, well, my husband would know. I said, well, how would he know? Well, because I'd be jumping around like this. I said, yeah, but that's secondary. Who knows first?
That's right.
It's like, oh, who gets the sensation to pee first? I do. Good. Then that's the person who's responsible for how you feel. You know if you need a hug.
That's right.
You know if you have to pee.
Exactly.
You know if you need a shoulder to cry on.
Yeah. You know the movie The Runaway Bride with Julia Roberts and Richard Gere?
Yes.
There's a segment in that movie, and I often reference the second segment because it's about how she likes everything that the other person likes. And she really doesn't know even what kind of eggs she likes. And so there's a whole segment of her.
Oh, I love that
Of
example.
her, scrambling eggs, over easy, all these different kinds. And she finally figures out what it is that she likes and what it is that she needs.
Yeah.
So that comes into the values and needs part of what I do too. And so I do a whole assessment around that and figuring out what your values are, what your needs are. What do you need in your life? What is it that you need? Forget about everybody else and everything else that's going on around you. What do you need in your life?
And you know what? That's really important because you cannot have an authentic friendship, relationship without authenticity and two people coming together with their own truth. Like in a friendship, like with you and I, for instance, you would say to me, oh, Candace, I really like, can we go and do this? I'm like, you know what, Kat, I love that you want to go do that, but you know what? That doesn't work for me. And so in that moment, I'm being loving. I'm speaking the truth in love to you because I'm telling you what's loving.
Right.
I'm not hurting you saying, I don't want to do that with you. I'm saying, no, that doesn't work for me. Let's find something we can do together that we both love. And you're being really honest with yourself and saying, oh, well, I'm really disappointed because I was really hoping you would like that. But you know what? Let's figure out what we can do that's together.
Exactly.
And that we both are staying true to ourselves. My daughter is so smart. She's gotten through some really challenging things in her life. And, I don't have her permission to reveal everything, so I'm not going to. But one of the things she taught me is what she calls landmines. So mother-daughter conversations, being raw, real, and right now, you can have some really tense conversations with your girls in particular.
Sure.
Boys don't get into it quite as much as what the girls would be, especially when they're adults. Mom, I really don't like it when you did this or did that. So one of the things that my daughter and I have committed to, she's 25, is that we're going to have conversations and we're going to use a trigger word called landmine. And it's her way of saying that's a bomb that's going to go off in my mind. And I don't have enough information right now, Mom, to address it in a way that's respectful. So we're going to call it landmine, don't touch it. So we'll be having a natural conversation about her growing up or things that happened to her when she was younger or how she perceived I said things to her that she felt were hurtful. And we'd get into it and all of a sudden she'd go, Mom, landmine. And I go, okay. And then I have to stop and I go, okay, but I really want to finish. Mom, landmine. I'm like, okay, we won't continue any farther. She said, and she's gotten smart. She's like, Mom, right now I feel like I'm not being true to myself and I don't know why. I'm not blaming you, but something just triggered. Can I call you back in a few minutes when I sort it out? And we're like, okay, no problem. She hangs up the phone. She calls me back 15 minutes later. I figured it out. I was trying to please you in that moment, a habit that I'd fallen into from when I was a kid. Not that I knew you didn't want me to do that, but it was my habit. And I found myself falling into that and I just had to stop myself. I'm like, oh my God, I love that.
Isn't that wonderful?
I love that.
That is brilliant.
Isn't that growth?
I love it.
Growth. So now you're going to tell me, like we chatted earlier, you've got a grandma story
Yes, I do.
about how you perceive things because that's going to start to move into what my passions are. But go ahead and...
Right. Okay, so there's a couple of things around perceptions that I wanted to talk about. First of all, what other people think of you is really none of your business. That's so important. And if people could get that at a really young age, boy, that would just change everything for people.
Oh, I love that.
Absolutely. It's not mine, but
it's none of your
I
business.
use it all the time.
Oh, it's none of my business what you think of me.
That's right. So all that matters is what you think of yourself. Anyway, so as I was growing up, we moved a lot. We moved every 6 months. My dad was in the military and all that stuff. And I had to stay with my grandmother for a year. My other siblings stayed with my mom and dad, and I had no idea why I was shipped off to see my grandma and grandpa. Now, my grandmother and I had a different style of communication, a different style of understanding each other. So when she was a little bit more gruff, because I'm highly sensitive, I'm an intuitive, I'm a
creative,
empath, all those things, she wasn't that person. She was a totally different ball of wax. So when she would be gruff with me or when she would, not treat me the way I wanted to be treated, I thought she hated me. I thought, I put this story into my head, okay, I'm not blonde, I'm not blue-eyed, I'm not, totally German speaking. She doesn't like me.
Wow.
And, there were things that happened. Of course there were things that happened. People are human. And she was, behaving in a way that she would normally behave. And I honestly thought that she hated me and didn't want me around. So what I did was I reflected on that a few years ago and I figured out a few things. She would braid my hair in the morning, every morning before I went to school. She would put cream in it and braid it. That's a loving thing to do. Mm-hmm. She would make me incredible food because she used to be a chef before in her previous life. She would make me incredible food. I was so skinny at the time, she wanted me to, gain some weight. So she would make these.
I know how to do that.
I know. And then there was a guy there one day who was a painter for the house, and she wanted me to eat, so she made potato pancakes, and she had a little contest. And I won the contest because she made them big enough so that I could eat 15 of them, and the guy was sitting there and he couldn't eat all those. Anyway, that's a loving thing to do. She would make sure that I was safe walking to and from school each day. And if there was something that was unsafe, she'd make sure she'd deal with it. So when we look at what's happening in our lives, you can reframe it and you can use your negative self-talk and flip it to positive self-talk, because our mistaken beliefs, like you say, our mistaken beliefs are what gets us into trouble all the time.
That's excellent. And for me, my pet peeve, I wouldn't say it's a pet peeve, but it's something that I find is a theme throughout myself, every human. I mean, we're all human. We're our best example of how to study a human being.
Sure.
If we study ourselves, and we study our own moods and our own thoughts, we find that we're just the same as everybody else.
Yeah.
And if we are smart enough, and we are, and we challenge ourselves to what I call higher level thinking, if someone makes a decision about something that everybody else can come to the conclusion of, obviously, like, oh, that person's really nasty, or I don't like that person. It didn't take an ounce of intelligence to come to that conclusion. Right. It just took observation and judgment. Mm-hmm. But an intelligent person, an evolved person, a higher level person wants to get to the root of, this is my belief, but it doesn't make my relationships better when I believe it. Mm-hmm. There must be something wrong. Because the foundational principle is that truth sets free. It always does. So if you have a belief, for instance, someone had shared with me recently that they, I have this friend, and since this person was 5 years old, they always knew their parents didn't love them. And I went, did you hear that, what you just said? They're like, well, what's with that? And I just said, if that's the belief that a 5-year-old has created in their mind based on limited perspective, inability to recognize behaviors in adults or any of that kind of stuff, if that's the limiting belief that they already have, then they spend their entire life on what looks like a false foundation. Right. So it's like a brick in a foundation that's off sideways. Everything you build on top of that will be sideways.
Exactly right.
And what's interesting to me is that this adult could not manage adult relationships with themselves. They were completely always in a state of broken relationship because their lie, and they never even questioned it, was that I wasn't loved as a child. So what do you think they're doing? Their whole life they're looking for that love. Well, if it was true, it would have worked. The lie had to be extracted and exposed. So going back and saying, how do you know your parents actually didn't love you? I don't have any evidence.
Really questioning yourself. Is that really true? Can you look for examples? Where's my mistaken belief in this?
Yeah.
How can I reframe that particular incident? I have a thought log that I use quite often with clients. And you go through the event, you have an emotional response, and there are consequences to your emotional response. What I like to do is to have people reframe it. How could I have done this differently?
And you know what? That really works. And it's getting down to the root of those lies that we tell ourselves. And that's the thing. Like, honestly, I've done that with myself. I mean, I grew up in a challenged family environment. We've all got them.
Absolutely.
I don't care how pretty people look on the outside. Everybody struggles because we're all made out of the same stuff. And I had to start asking myself, does this mean that someone doesn't love me? Does this mean, I had to challenge those questions. And what small child has the bigger picture? You don't. You have your own basic instincts of fight, flight, and freeze as a child. Everything's reactionary. Well, you don't want to stay a child in your mind. Yeah. So the way to transpose from childhood to adulthood is to start becoming curious and observant and asking yourself, well, if that's true, how come it doesn't make me feel better? It hurts to think that my parents didn't love me. Wait a minute, my mom gave me this dirty look and I thought it was a dirty look, but what she was doing was wincing in pain. Maybe she stepped on something and hurt herself. And I, in my little childhood mind, said, oh, my mom doesn't love me. Like creating these stories. Mm-hmm. This was vitally important. That in these moments of being raw, real, and right now, the best thing we can do for ourselves right now is to absolutely start to become curious about the things that are hurting us and set our judgments aside, even about ourselves, because we don't know the answers.
That's right.
Don't you think?
I agree completely on that. Yeah.
Well, stay tuned for our next segment on Raw, Real, and Right Now, where we're going to get into some really meaty material. And we might even have a piece of meat on our plate, too. I don't know.
This was awesome.
Now, I made a cheesecake.
I made the tea.
You did. You boiled the water perfectly. So next time we're going to talk about something really super deep. And right now I just want to draw your attention to a great book that Kat and I have both been reading.
Yeah.
This is a great book if you need it for yourself. I think you can get it online through Amazon.com. It's called The Powerful Self.
Yes, yeah.
And it's a workbook of therapeutic self-empowerment by Dr. Stephen Stosny. And he basically teaches us that it's compassion for self.
That's it. That's what it's all about.
And others.
Yeah.
And it has to be win-win, not I win,
Absolutely.
you lose.
Nope.
You lose, I win. It has to be win-win.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
And I just want to close with this one thing. It's my husband and I's 3rd anniversary coming up, and I'm just so grateful for him in my life, and he as well. And we challenge each other to grow and don't let each other off the hook on stuff, which is a great relationship.
Yeah.
And one of the things we said in our vows, and we hold to it, is that during difficult emotional times, I choose to remember that your heart is still for me.
Yeah.
And with that foundation, we can get through anything.
That's right. Absolutely. You're right. Yep. Awesome.
See you next time.
You bet.